I've decided it's time to change the radius arms on my Land Rover Defender TD5. So what I'm doing firstly is taking the front wheel off so that I can get at two of the nuts and bolts that hold the front radius arm on. I've looked online, and some people say to do it with the wheel off, some people say do it with the wheels on. So firstly I'm going to try with the wheel on. So once I've loosened these nuts, I'm going to put the wheel back on and see how it goes from there. I know I could have just replaced the bushes on the radius arms, but I decided to get new radius arms with the bushes already in them to save time and aggravation. I should be able to refurbish these radius arms I'm taking off and get a bit of money back on them. As usual, the nuts are a struggle to get off. This is mainly caused in this instance by the old underbody seal, which seems to have got in the threads. The blow lamp and the wire brush help soften it all up and clean it off, but it's still a bit of a struggle. So once I've got all the nuts and bolts undone and loosened, I'm going to then put the front wheel back on, which hopefully will stop any movement once I take the right hand radius arm off. With limited space to swing a hammer, I found an old Allen key ideal for tapping out the existing bolts. They weren't stiff, they were just wedged in there. I supported the front of the radius arm with the jack just to make my life a little bit easier and to prevent it from falling and doing any potential damage. Once the two front bolts were out, it was just a case of getting a bar and helping the radius arm to come down a little bit at a time, and then catching it on the jack and just lowering it slowly, and then releasing the rear nut. Here's the old radius arm alongside the new radius arm. The bushes are pretty bad on it, and I'm not surprised, it's nearly 20 years old. Before reassembly, I'm going to smother the various parts, or the relative parts, in copper grease and Lanogard. This is the thick Lanogard grease that I'm applying here. Later on I'll spray the underneath with ordinary everyday Lanogard, just to protect the underside from the winter elements. So I'm brushing the Lanogard everywhere, or in all the places where I might not be able to get to after the radius arm's fitted. I'm covering the new bolts with copper grease just to prevent any corrosion or sticking, and also hopefully it will lubricate them once they're fitted, or during the fitting. Fitting the new radius arm was pretty straightforward, however the axle had moved, so once I jacked the radius arm up into the rough position, I then had to attach a ratchet strap to pull the axle forward so that the holes would line up, and then it went in quite well without too much bother. Next day I decided to tackle the other side. This time I decided I would do it without the wheel on, to see if that would make much difference and speed up the process perhaps. I forgot to mention that you have to disconnect the steering rod at the back to allow the radius arm to drop down and clear the axle. This isn't a problem, just undo the nut and give it a couple of strikes with a hammer and it comes loose and it can be lifted away quite easily. As before, the nuts and bolts were pretty stiff and covered in underbody seal, so I had to use the blow lamp to loosen everything up and with a wire brush, but with a bit of patience eventually they all came undone and came out quite easily. Here I just used a basic lever and fulcrum just to get things started. With a little to and froing and a few more hits with the blow lamp, these two front nuts eventually came undone. I've only got an 18-inch or 450mm breaker bar. I think it's about time I invested in a 2-foot or 600mm breaker bar. This nut is resisting right until the very end. Once again, I'm using the Allen key to push the bolts a little bit further out and also supporting the old radius arm on the jack. As you can see here, as I drop the radius arm out, the axle moves slightly. Fortunately, I've got it supported by a good quality axle stand. In fact, I think it's the body that moves, not the axle. As there'd been some movement, I needed to use the ratchet straps again just to pull the axle slightly forward so the holes in the axle and the radius arm would align. Eventually I got it all back together, all the nuts nice and tight and torqued up to the relative specification, and if I'm honest, I think doing this job with the wheel off was easier than doing it with the wheels on. The axle did still move, but it just seemed easier not having the wheel in the way. Overall, I was pleased with the job that I did. It's just a little maintenance issue that I just needed to get done, as the radius arms and bushes were 20 years old. The total time to do the job was about 6 to 7 hours, I suppose, what with tea breaks and everything. Cost was £150, and that was just for the cost of the new radius arms with the bushes already fitted. So that's it, another job done. The wife will be pleased. We're ready for another holiday.